Hello Magic Makers, welcome to Storytime with Mombierella. This is a young adult fiction and may be inappropriate for some younger viewers. Evil Thing. A Tale of That DeVille Woman by Serena Valentino. Copyright Disney Enterprises Incorporated, 2020. Chapter 13, Part 2.
Mrs. Webb came into the room then. Empty-handed, wouldn't you know it? Good Lord, woman, where is the champagne? The spider just stood there, quiet and still, looking as if she had seen a ghost, or perhaps her own reflection. I turned to my mother. This is an outrage, Mamma. What is going on with your staff? Is everyone hell-bent on driving me mad today? Cruella, what is wrong with you? Do calm down. My mother put a hand to her forehead, as if I were giving her a headache. And what are you doing? Stop fidgeting with your earrings. Those are the earrings your father gave you. Think how upset you'd be if you lost one. They're bothering me for some reason, I said, twisting the jade ball again, hoping it would make a difference. We'll take them off. They're making you irritable. We'd completely forgotten about Mrs. Webb. She stood there staring at us, looking ghastly, like someone had drained all the blood from her face. What's the matter, Mrs. Webb? Why have you still not brought our drinks in? My mother was beginning to sound testy as well. Perhaps I was rubbing off on her. Mrs. Webb just stood there, staring for a moment, before she finally spoke. Lady Cruella, it's your husband. What about my husband? I asked, still distracted by my earring and wondering what she could possibly be going on about. Is he here? I don't know how to say this, Lady Cruella, but he's been killed. That's impossible, I scoffed. Jack would never allow himself to be killed. There must be some mistake. The spider may have been ghastly, but this seemed like a very cruel trick to play on me, even for her. I'm so sorry, my lady, but it's true. Jackson and the rest of your staff are downstairs. They're very shaken up. It didn't make any sense. Everything felt confusing and surreal. Why are they here? Where's Jackson? Send him up so I can speak with him, I said. I think he's in shock, my lady, she said, looking at me with pity in her eyes. I couldn't stand it. Everyone was always looking at me like that, for my whole life, and I had enough. I couldn't abide it, from her of all people. I just stood there. I think my daughter is also in shock, Mrs. Webb, my mother said. Her voice was surprisingly gentle. Please send Jackson up here at once, so we can speak to him. Mrs. Webb just stood there for another moment, unsure, unmoving. Send him up here at once, I screamed. Send him up this moment. Do you understand? Go! The woman went scuttling out of the room, and I was left with my mamma, alone. Was I alone now? Was my crackerjack really gone? I couldn't fathom it. I didn't believe it. There was no way my Jack was dead. Not crackerjack. He was too strong to die, too stubborn to allow himself to be killed. It didn't make sense. There had to be some sort of mistake. Miss Prickett came into the morning room instead of Jackson. She looked dreadful. Her face, hands, and clothing were smudged with some sort of soot, and her hair was mussed. I felt so relieved to see her that I almost started to cry. Miss Prickett, what's happened? Where's Jackson? I said. Oh, my lady, I'm so sorry, was all she could say before she started to cry, so hard she was shaking with every breath. What happened? Please tell me what happened. No one can seem to tell me what's happened to my husband. Miss Prickett looked at Mamma nervously. Her hands were shaking. Have some brandy, girl, and sit down and tell my daughter what's happened. This is madness. Where's Jackson? My mother was raising her voice, clearly as frustrated as I was. Miss Prickett poured herself a little glass of brandy and drank it down all at once, then composed herself. Mr. Jackson is downstairs with the others. Mrs. Webb called for the doctor when we arrived. The doctor's looking at Mr. Jackson now. That's why I came up. And she started to cry again, sobbing uncontrollably. She told the story between great heaving breaths. Oh, Lady Cruella, I'm so sorry. We did everything we could, but the fire was too great. Jackson tried to save him. He wanted to, but the fire was out of control. We couldn't even get to the study. Our way was blocked, and it was spreading throughout the house. Only those who were downstairs made it out of the house, Lady Cruella. When the fire brigade finally arrived, there was nothing of the house left. I couldn't believe it. Jack must have made his way out. Are you sure Jack was in his study? Maybe he went out, I asked desperately. No, my lady. He was in his study all afternoon. Jackson would have known if he'd went out, she said, shaking with tears. Did the fire brigade find his body? I asked, convinced he had slipped out without anyone noticing. They haven't, my lady, but they are still investigating, trying to find the source of the fire. Then there's a chance he wasn't killed, I said. Jack can't be dead. He can't. I won't believe it until I see it myself. Have someone bring a car around. But, my lady, there's nothing to see but ashes and ruin. There's nothing left. Mrs. Prickett was right. There was nothing left. The house, all of our belongings, everything was gone. Jack was gone. I never forgave Jackson and the others for surviving the fire. I didn't understand why someone couldn't save him. None of the servants could tell me what happened. Not coherently, anyway. The only people who made it out of the house unhurt were the staff downstairs. Everyone in the main part of the house was killed. The fire marshal said there was likely some sort of mishap with the fireplace in the study. He said there was an enormous amount of rubbish, papers, and files stuffed into the fireplace, and that he found Jack's body sitting near the fireplace in what was left of his chair. He thought Jack had fallen asleep sitting there, and that's why he hadn't realized the room caught fire. The smoke had caused him to become unconscious, and that's why he didn't wake. Then he didn't feel pain. He didn't suffer in the flames, I asked.
No, my lady, I don't think so. There's no sign that he was trying to get out of the room. In cases like this, we would see evidence that the person tried to break a window or make it to a doorway. Your husband was still sitting in his chair.
Then he asked me the unthinkable.
Was your husband upset about something, my lady? Had he shared any concerns with you he may have had?
I didn't understand.
I'm sorry, my lady, but I have to ask. The papers, the debris in the fireplace, there was so much of it. It did look as if he was trying to burn those things on purpose.
Don't be ridiculous. My husband was the happiest person I know. He wouldn't do something foolish, and he wasn't trying to hide some sort of shady skullduggery. I'm not entirely convinced that is his body you found. He wouldn't do that to me. He wouldn't leave me. He wouldn't. We had no means of identifying Jack's body, or any of the servants' bodies that were found in the main house. For all I knew, it was one of the footmen who died in Jack's study, sneaking a drink and a nap by the fire. Nothing of the body's clothes were left. Nothing of him. I became more convinced that Jack wasn't home when the fire broke out. So I waited. I waited in the ashes for my love to come home. I refused to leave, sure my Jack would come home to me. Mama finally sent a car for me and had me brought back to Belgrave Place. She had me take my old room and instructed Jackson and the other survivors from the fire to stay downstairs out of sight. I locked myself up in my room for weeks, refusing to eat, refusing to believe my Jack was gone. I still feel in my heart he's alive. I stayed locked in my old room, at my mother's, for about 3 weeks before she tried to force me out. But that is another chapter, another part of the story. I don't wish to write about it now. It breaks my heart too much. I'd rather keep writing about my Jack. But what else is there to say? He's either dead or pretending to be dead. At one point I thought maybe he had left for some business trip without telling me. Perhaps some sort of emergency. I didn't know. I was grasping for any explanation I could think of. But it's been quite some time now, since the fire. Everyone keeps telling me that I should accept that the person in Jack's crypt is really Jack. My beloved Jack. My cracker Jack. They tell me I should say goodbye. But I can't bring myself to say it. Not yet.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this reading. If you haven't had a chance to, please take a second, like, subscribe, ring that notification bell, comment down below, share with a friend, and check out some of the other Villain series chapters and books as well. Join us next time, and remember, let it go and keep moving forward. Have a magical day. Bye.